Good evening. How are you? Well, it's 90 degrees out. It was higher today. It's about 6 o'clock it is now. And there is no wind. It is just as still could be. I've been listening to more today. Yesterday I was writing until late in the evening. I finished and filed some documents at like 11:30. And during the day, I couldn't get a break out. I just had to write. I had a self-imposed deadline, but I know the court might not see it if I didn't get it out by yesterday. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So today I've had a more reasonable schedule, and I have heard some of the news and so forth. I am interested in how we're covering the Trump phenomenon. We say things like, how do we persuade the Trump people? And the answer is that we don't. We can't. When I say we can't inform them, I'm not saying that's true for all of them. You know, there's a softer, maybe fringe, or if you will, that could be independent and might not vote for a Democrat, might not vote at all. But the core Trumpians are delusional. They fall prey to conspiracies that explain why Trump really won the election, while Biden is part of the deep dark state, and so on. You know, and that's a problem. So that's not how we win an election. And I think that we have to understand that the core supporters of Trump are delusional because they defy reality, they defy common investigation to find out the facts, and then they have a frame of reference for value system which is either imposed or non-existent. And when it's imposed, it comes from on high. And if you were in the Ministry of Truth, which is Orwell's group, you would be designing a way to persuade the people to buy into a certain thing, and this is a more amenable group to being filtered and changed and supportive of Trump. So I think we have to think about who do we support. Well, you identify the battleground states where you have to be concerned about electors, honest, true electors, who they're going to vote for. And you get on it. And I think that Obama's second election was masterful in the ground game he put together, but also it was masterful in the way they used the numbers. And it's as simple and as difficult as this. You figure out what you need to win, and you enlarge the vote by that number in the key states by which you win the election. And then those states where you don't have to spend so much or know so much or expand the vote so much, you don't have to do some of the things. Now, I don't think Obama took any state lightly when he ran in the second election. And I'm sure that Biden understands that. And I'm sure he's doing exactly that. In fact, I saw a report that sounded like that. They don't say it the way I'm saying it. So what is our control on that? Well, the campaigns are not going to tell us what they're doing, but I think that's what they're doing. It strikes me today that there are a number of stories that we might call sad stories. And I start with Sinead O'Connor, who died at 56. She's a fabulous entertainer. Maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but her voice and her song appealed to me. Now in the 90s, I think it was, she was on Saturday Night Live, and I think she ripped up a poster of the Pope. And the explanation was that how could you be a predator to these children, and how can you have the policies that you do? And so let's get this straight. And then, as happens, some people were more upset that she ripped up the poster than that these children are being preyed upon. Now, I went to a high school, and some were, and we find out about it years later. And that's a very difficult and sad thing. But I think Sinead was right. I think she should have said what she did say. And it shows that the freedom of speech is a prepositional freedom. That is, you have freedom of speech. You don't have freedom after speech. And so you have to be made of tough stuff to fight that. And poor Sinead O'Connor went through terrible changes and personal problems in her life. And I suppose in the next several days we'll find out what happened. So that's one sad story. Another one is closer to home. It's this guy, Donald Lawson. And I don't know him, but I do know of him. And I think when he was a kid, something like 9 years old, he fell in love with these ships that could go anywhere in the world. It caught him. And I think the terrible thing for children or young people is nothing catches you. If something catches you and you go with it, all sorts of good things happen to you because you're active. And we're meant to be active. We're not meant to be passive. And if you're passive, you compromise your own vitality. So I don't know if it means long living, but it does mean the quality of your time is good. And it's not that we live too short, it's that we don't live at all, that we don't use the time. So Donald Lawson, he not only did sailing himself in the Baltimore-Alexandria area, but he brought this gift to others, persons of color, so that they would understand it and do it and have this opportunity that he had. Donald is lost at sea. Not an exaggeration. Another sad story. Will he be found? Perhaps. But right now, it's been long enough that people are concerned. There was a sighting, I think, but that's all we have to go on. Another sad person, in my opinion, or something we can be sad about, because sometimes we're a prisoner of our own beliefs, characteristics, shortcomings, flaws. And I think that's true of Ralph Nader. I met Ralph Nader during the Watergate period. There was a councilman that I was friendly with named Henry Stern, and Henry Stern gone to Harvard, and Nader and he, I don't know if they'd been classmates, but they'd known each other a long time. And we did a walkabout up by Columbia University, and he spoke about the information that he'd found himself and others about what was going on with Nixon. And he said it was a hydra-headed beast. You cut off one head and two more come into place. And he was impressive as hell, and his projects were. And he was very careful not to have his integrity compromised so that his reforms would be believed. Okay, so that's the old Ralph Nader. Then he ran for president. Something he said he'd never do, run for public office. And it's believed that he compromised Gore's chances of becoming president. So then he became somewhat of a political waif, separated from the rest of political society and reform and that kind of activism. And so this is what's sad. He's written a book about unanswered letters. Letters he wrote people that they did not answer. Now, and then some are saying that this is, a wilting of the First Amendment. But it's not. If I write a letter to someone, unless there's a statute or something, or we have a duty to each other, they don't have to answer me. So my existence, or Ralph Nader's existence, does not in and of itself create an obligation for somebody else to do anything. And over the years, there have been people who've written to me, and I don't feel I have to write back to everyone. And I do write to a lot of people that I have no obligation to write to. And on some level, I feel that I should do that, because I think if you can add something to the value of our political discussion, I think that's something you should try and do. But Ralph apparently hasn't lost his impetus for change, but he's lost his ability to do it because, well, he's like the extra rail. He's anathema to many people. And while I'd enjoy having a lunch with him, I don't know that I would want to participate with him in any activist adventure. In the sad category, Hunter Biden today, he did not enter his plea of guilty. And the reason is because the prosecution wouldn't say that this is the complete deal that covers everything and nothing else. Now, what changed? There's been a lot of political pressure on the U.S. attorney, and Biden's lawyers said that, it's the deal, and the deal is what we understood it to be, and if it's not, we're out of here, and they were out of there. So that's kind of a shame. I don't carry water for Mitch McConnell, but I was concerned for him, despite the abyss that separates us politically, when for, I think it was like 19 seconds today at a press conference right outside his office, he went silent. And there was a movie years ago with Alan Alda in which he was at odds with a senior senator who was somewhat corrupt. And he started talking in other languages and so forth as he lost it. And I had that feeling about what was happening with McConnell, about him freezing during a press conference. So there's no remedy here. He should take care of himself, but I don't know if he's going to do that. I'm glad Kevin Spacey was acquitted. I don't know anything about the case. I do get the feel from his testimony that I haven't listened to it. I don't know if you can, but the summaries, because I was curious about how they handle that trial, because the way they handle defamation and things like that is very interesting in Great Britain. It's been many years since I was at Old Bailey's, I think it's called, which is the kind of like the trial court, lower court. Apologies to those if I got that wrong. I've been at that court, but many years ago. So, Kevin Spacey said he was humbled. He said all the right things afterwards, and apparently he was quite credible in the courtroom, and his accusers were not. Finally, there's one that brings us back to the Trump miasma, and it's the two workers that you may remember, Freeman and Moss, and they cried at the January 6th hearings and how they'd been destroyed by the false allegations made by Rudy and others about what they were doing and to steal the vote when they weren't doing anything of the sort. They had explanations and they were corroborated by the facts. So Rudy Giuliani today had to make a public apology and say they hadn't done anything wrong. Now that's interesting on several levels. His lawyer is Bob Costello. He and I were both assistant U.S. attorneys at the same time, and I was with Rudy as well. But Bob Costello and I had offices kitty corner to each other, and there's nothing from those days that has anything to do with his representation today of Rudy. And it wouldn't be surprising at all if Rudy hadn't become this strange creature. So Bob, who's a very good lawyer, may have said to him, we're about to crash into a wall if we don't put together something for you. Now, it may not be true, but when your client is talking and apologizing about some things, there's got to be a counterweight, a benefit that goes with that exposure that justifies him doing it. So I suspect that Rudy may have reached a point where he's cooperating at some level, but he has to take a kick to the can in order to move on from giving an off-the-record, immunized proffer of what happened to cooperating in such a way that he minimizes the danger to himself. So that's kind of a mix today. It's like a number of sad situations, stories, things people can't change. You know, when they talk about fiction, and Aristotle has wrote a great deal about it a long time ago, he always discusses heroes have to have a flaw that overcomes them, they overcome it. If the hero, the protagonist, prevails, it's a comedy. But much more interesting, and that's what the daily newspapers are really about, are the tragedies. The hero is overcome. And in a society now in which we have anti-heroes in every direction, you have to wonder how we get back to a frame of reference for a society and a culture that thinks in terms of the positive attributes of our players and not the negative ones. You know, it's okay to watch a movie at the OK Corral and think that's really terrific. They shot each other up. And this was great fun as a kid because it wasn't real, but now it's real. And as a society, we really can't go on if someone will kill someone else for supposedly taking a $10 bill at a restaurant. There's a story in the paper today. So we have to shoulder our responsibility to make this world a better place. And I'm hopeful that the next couple of indictments, I say couple because I'm hoping there'll be the second federal one and the first Georgia one, that will move us into an even better place. I think Biden, despite any of the legitimate criticism one can point to, has been campaigning hard, and I think with some effect. At the same time, on the Republican side, it appears that DeSantis can't get his campaign act together. And so Trump is way out there. Now, in a classical, historic scheme, the fact that the leading candidate is prosecuted and will be prosecuted, maybe even convicted before Election Day, is not the profile that you want. Not the anti-hero, not the hero, not the character defect, because it should mark tragedy for Trump and victory for America. So that's all I've got to say. Be careful out there because it's going to get hotter, they say. And so I wave you fond adieu from my cathedral of trees, and I hope to talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.